Okay, how's everybody out there doing tonight? I am Idaho Joe here with Kind Idaho Live tonight. Thank you for joining us. And my special guest this evening, the lovely, the beautiful, the gorgeous Ginger Christiansen, who has taken over responsibility as the secretary on the board of Kind Idaho. Our previous secretary had life happen and had to step down, and Ginger kindly stepped up. How are you doing today, Ginger?
Oh, doing okay. How are you today, Joe?
Today is a beautiful day. Yet another opportunity to work with such a lovely person like yourself. It's been a while since we've actually done work together, along these stages. We did the cocktail party together for which was a podcast we did about 2 years ago, a year ago now.
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years because we had to slow it down because of COVID
Right.
getting in the way of doing things and meeting up and so forth. So yeah, and so we did that, and we did Cup of Joe together sometimes, and we've worked on your campaign together and with the Idaho Libertarian Party and some other fundraisers for medical marijuana.
Yeah, so here we are. We've been doing Kind Idaho. Kind Idaho has actually been in existence as an organization for 12 months now. Jackie filed the paperwork a year ago, November, and with John Basabe, the board was created, and here we are a year later. We're looking at transformation, everything that's going on. We're getting ready to go into a new legislative session. Some of the people who started with Kind Idaho have had to step aside because of life issues, and we've had other amazing people step in. What is it that has you interested in actually supporting Kind Idaho from a board position right now, Ginger?
Well, I think that legalizing medical marijuana is really important in the state of Idaho and across the country for that matter. And I think that Kind Idaho is in a really good position to do that and to work with other groups to do that. One issue that people have had in getting legalization to happen here, people always think that it's because of legislators and other people that are in position in office here in Idaho blocking it. And to some degree, that's true. But largely, it's because special interest groups sometimes have a really hard time with getting together and working together and being able to work as a team. Sometimes ego gets in the way. Sometimes personalities don't match. Sometimes it's just a matter of understanding structure and moving forward and being able to work together. And so I think I'm in a really good position to be able to help with some team building for Kind Idaho. I certainly don't want to be in charge in any way. And I think that really helps because a lot of people want to join groups like this and think they're just going to come in and crack a whip and tell everybody what to do. And that's usually so not useful. That is a really good way to get nobody to listen to you and for a lot of infighting to happen. And so I think what is more useful is coming in and saying things like, okay, what's everybody good at? Let's all figure out what it is we're good at and be positive to each other, help each other to be able to have the support in place to do what it is their task is within the organization. And so that's really a big deal. I think Jackie does a pretty good job with managing things when she has good support. And so I'm really glad to help her out and getting to know the rest of the team. They're all really lovely people and their heart's in the right place. And I think we got a lot done in the last session. So that made me feel really good about it. And that legalization is something that can become a reality in the near future makes a really big difference to me.
So one of the things that we look at as things develop is we're coming up on the next legislative session.
Mhm.
Now, last year we had Jeremy Kitzhaber. He's a United States Air Force vet. He was able to actually get a bill in front of the state legislature, in front of the committee, that could be heard for medical marijuana. There were a lot of people who were proponents of it, several people who had disagreements because of different issues. But this was one of those things where, as marijuana activists, we were able to step in and help, from a legislative perspective. Do you see being able to be that sort of cheerleader for legislative actions, even as we continue to collect signatures for the initiative?
Oh, absolutely. I think that more now than there ever has been, there's a really clear path to being able to legalize. We have very conservative groups like the Mormon Church that are very interested, and this is a Mormon state, guys, that are very interested in seeing medical marijuana pass. And that's a big deal if we can get in and we can work with them. A lot of conservatives want to see this legalized. And we also have a lot of liberals that want to see this legalized. And more than anything, having grown up here, I tend to think that Idaho is more of a libertarian state than it realizes. So we probably have a lot of moderates. I have a hard time talking to anybody on any part of the spectrum that doesn't think that this is a good idea. And so I believe that it can happen if done in the right way. I think that even though there are some lawmakers that are a bit resistant, I think that if they are appealed to correctly, if they're presented with the right bills, and if they get enough public outcry, because let's face it, they want to keep their jobs. And so, as resistant as they may be, a lot of lawmakers will just go with public opinion more than anything, especially if it's popular, just because they want to be elected back in and they want to have approval. So if we can show that this is very popular, that it can be done responsibly, that it has a lot of backing, that I think that it'll get voted in. I think it's pretty easy to get done if we can just get all of the groups to work together on a bill. And if we can outreach to people that haven't been included in the past.
Absolutely. So, like you mentioned, we have a lot of politicians here in the state who actually object to legalization of marijuana in any form. Matter of fact, they object to it so heavily. Getting the hemp bill passed last year was a major chore for several lobbyist organizations, the farm organizations, as well as several others. But it's like you said, we've had policy surveys sent out over the last couple of years that indicated anywhere from 70 to 80% of Idahoans would like to see some sort of medical marijuana bill passed in the state of Idaho so that people have access to it. Yet we continue to see resistance from key leaders. Utah recently, the Utah state legislature recently passed a medical marijuana bill, strongly advocated for by the LDS Church, just like you mentioned. So this is something that there's a lot of common belief. Just because we're conservative, just because of the strong Catholic and LDS presence in the state, there is a religious movement to actually support medical marijuana in the state of Idaho, as well as everywhere in the West. So, as you mentioned, absolutely, one of the things that we do want to do is be able to reach out to those conservative groups, those conservative religious groups, who want to be able to see this legalized in such a way so that they can move forward and they can be able to use this as a compassionate outreach to several people who have medical needs for it. Now, one of the things that you and I actually share, which is odd for cannabis activists, for marijuana activists, is that neither one of us are actually users.
That's right.
We have friends who use it. We have friends who need it for a number of different reasons, everywhere from pain management issues, endometriosis, glaucoma, cancer treatments. Some people who have even used it to recover from something as invasive as kidney cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a kidney cancer survivor myself. Um, I didn't use marijuana to actually put it into remission. I actually went in for the surgery. You have several medical issues yourself, which, if it wasn't for contraring indicators, medical marijuana would be recommended for several of your conditions, yet neither of us. So what makes it important to you, even though you can't use it, to make sure that it's available as an option for other people?
Yeah, I'm allergic. Go me. I'm allergic, so I can't actually use that. However, um, marijuana is proven in lab results all over the world. It's proven to be an effective and safe treatment for more than 50 conditions. Some of those conditions, it's a safer treatment than what is commonly used. And one, for instance, is something like adult ADHD. Now, a lot of people with adult ADHD, and I'm not even going to bother to go into kids because that is a really hot issue. Let's get to that someday. But let's legalize at least for adults for now and then see where we land. But for adult ADHD, for instance, a lot of people that have that, and yeah, I agree it's non-toxic for children, but not everyone does. We don't have to always agree on every last aspect of it to agree on at least one part. Should it be legalized for adults for medical purposes? So somebody could go in and get a prescription from their doctor that says, yes, they can and should be using this for this medical condition. Can we at least get that far? Is that something that we could agree on, that if a medical doctor thought it was okay, that somebody could use that for their own body and have that be right for them? Let's say I'm one of those people that didn't agree at all that marijuana was even good for you. I would still think that if somebody wanted to use that as a treatment for their body, that maybe it's a little bit better than taking something like Ritalin or Adderall, which is a methamphetamine or an amphetamine. Um, and a lot of people that have, say, adult ADHD, they're prescribed these things. And why are we giving them amphetamines? Why is that better than giving them CBD, for instance? And a lot of people also that have adult ADHD, for a really good example, they tend to self-medicate. So it might be with alcohol, it might be with antidepressants, and various other things. They tend to really self-medicate, and that makes it so that we have more people with addiction problems out there, where there are studies that find that if they're simply going ahead and using medical marijuana with CBD or with THC, so far there's not really a difference in studies that I've read, that they are less likely to self-medicate, that if they had a previous addiction, this basically just gets rid of that for them, that they're then able to use this to cope and stop using other street or legal drugs to medicate, that they're then just regulated. I think that's a really beautiful thing. I know I kind of circled around some points there, so I hope you guys followed me. I was reading the things on the side, so I got a little sidetracked and going, yeah, I'll address your point right now.
So, one of the things, I'm a United States Army veteran, and as Dan McKnight brought up, one of my good friends, Dan McKnight's a United States Marine, and he actually deployed to Afghanistan as an Idaho National Guardsman. And we have another friend, U.S. Marine, who's actually serving right now in the state legislature, who actually is a very strong advocate from the Republican side of the House for medical marijuana. Ben Adams. And a lot of this comes back to, as Dan mentions here, post-traumatic stress. One of the things that some of us are trying to address is the fact that we don't like to use the term post-traumatic stress disorder, because that gives an indication that there's no real way to and Nathan, Utah Veterans for Medical Cannabis, absolutely. But post-traumatic stress injury, because we like to believe that post-traumatic stress is an injury and it's something that can be healed, it's something that can be repaired.
Oh, go ahead.
And medical cannabis, it's been proven, along with certain other drugs, medical cannabis, medical marijuana has been able to relieve stress. And we have a number of veterans all across the United States, a similar situation like you were mentioning, self-medicating because this works for them. But because they don't have access to medical quality, they don't have access to medical grade, it's hit or miss whether or not they get the right dosages, whether or not they're getting the right content, whether they're getting the right blend of cannabinoids, from one dose to the next.
Right. Yeah, with post-traumatic stress, what we know about it now is that it is a problem with the amygdala. The amygdala gets damaged. It's essentially brain damage. The amygdala gets damaged when you are experiencing a trauma. And in order to correct that damage, it enlarges even and shrink back down. Various things help. Things like, interestingly, calcium, vitamin D, and that's extremely useful. You can just get those like little chocolatey calcium chewies if you're having like a panic attack, and you can chew on those. However, in the long term, we do know that one of the things that's highly effective for post-traumatic stress is CBD, that it calms those things down. And it shrinks the amygdala back up. Why that's important is because when the amygdala is enlarged, you're getting a lot of stuff going on in your brain, such as cortisol being released, which is your stress hormone. And that kills some other things that your brain should be producing, such as serotonin and 5-HTP, and your things that give you the general sense of well-being in your brain. And so it's not just like an emotional issue. This is a real physiological problem, and we have a real way of being able to correct it. And there are a number of treatments. So I don't always think that marijuana is the end all and be all of something that treats this. However, for different people, different things work. And this is proven to be very effective for that and really important. And would we rather have a bunch of people self-medicating at home with alcohol and other drugs? Would we rather have them on antidepressants, which most antidepressants run on the theory of the reuptake system, which is the belief that your brain is reabsorbing somehow your serotonins and not producing them in the rest of your body like it should. So what they do, most antidepressants, not all of them, they're a muscle relaxant, which lowers your inhibitions a little bit. So do we want a bunch of people taking these things out there and seeing the rate of domestic violence increase, seeing a lot of other abuses and self-abuses happen and a lot of other crimes going on? Or would we like to just go ahead and release this as a treatment so that people can take this where we know that it factually works and that they are calm and relaxed without their inhibitions being lowered, which used to be something we believed, that it greatly lowered their inhibitions, but in lab studies it shows that it actually doesn't. So if they're getting something on the street, probably it does, but what is included in that is things like pesticides that are used on whatever the plant is that they bought with the street weed, being laced with other things, not purity of product like you're talking about. If we legalize, we can tax it, we can regulate it, we can guarantee what is in it as opposed to it being something on the street. And right now, and a lot of people don't know, but you can look it up, we have a real problem because people can go outside of Idaho and get legalized marijuana. We have a real problem with street vendors. We'll call them vendors. With street dealers lacing their product with things like PCP, and just a little bit. And why are they doing that? Because it keeps them feeling like they're getting more of a high off of what they're getting locally, so they're not trying to go out of state to get it. That's a big problem, right? Oh yeah, that's a big comment too. So that's a really big problem, that then we're seeing people that are showing signs because they've used it of things like schizophrenia, where doctors are not aware of this issue. We're seeing permanent brain damage in people from having used that. And in states where this is legalized, that just completely goes away almost entirely, because people don't go to street dealers anymore. Why would they, when they can guarantee over here is the thing they want, and for probably less money?
So
took you right down a rabbit hole, didn't I?
Right. No, but one of the things, okay, we talk an awful lot about veterans and post-traumatic stress injury. But those aren't the only kinds of stress injuries that are out there, even though that's what we've been used to associate. Sexual trauma as stress injury, things like sexual assault, rape, and how that leads to self-medication in the exact same way.
Yeah, it's all still issues with the amygdala. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My brother stepping in, prohibition never worked. Yeah.
Nope.
You want something, you're going to find it. Absolutely. But with sexual trauma related post-traumatic stress injuries, you still have the same problem in that, if people are self-medicating and they don't have consistent quality, they don't have a regulated quality, so that you keep running into the same problem in that these additives that get put in change the way the mind works, and you lose the ability to regulate and actually facilitate healing as a result. So, right. Being able to create a legal market for it is an extremely important aspect of being able to actually use medical marijuana to heal, or use marijuana to heal, period. Because that's what we need to do in order to make sure that we see consistent quality, that we see purity of product, that we see these things where we're actually approaching it with whole foods and microbes in the appropriate way, that all of that comes together. When you're dealing with street, you never know what you're getting.
Yeah, and really, when I talk about the pesticides that can be used and different chemicals that can be used on a homegrown plant, it's worse than you think. That some of that stuff isn't what you would use on your tomatoes at home. And so we're finding, especially with things that are smuggled in from other countries, they're using pesticides that are illegal in the US, and they're illegal in the US for a reason. Those are really damaging to your brain and and your body in general. And if you think that Roundup is legal here, imagine what we've decided is bad for you. So yeah, you really want to be careful with what you're using, but in this way, again, it can be taxed, it can be regulated, and this is the stuff that my conservative friends and family tell me, is that they want to see that they want to see it provided by legal means, instead of it being in the hands of cartels, instead of creating more problems with drug dealers on the streets. And this takes a lot of power away from that, because then what are they left with? If we legalize and people aren't having to go for coping mechanisms to their local drug dealer because they can just get a prescription from their doctor and use in moderation with care, then it really takes so much power out of the hands of street dealers and out of the hands of cartels and away from things like violent gangs.
So let's go back to this point Dan brought up earlier. Cannabis over opioids, particularly for pain management.
Oh my gosh, right?
Right? Right now, one of the problems that we have in the state of Idaho is opioid use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
The gentrified process, or the gentrification of opioid addiction. And this is one of these things where we prescribed opioids to people for pain management and then stripped them of their prescriptions. So they go out on the street and they start looking for it, and they find heroin, and they find fentanyl laced results that have caused a huge increase recently here in the state of Idaho of deaths and so on related to fentanyl overdoses, opioid overdose, and heroin overdoses as a result. Police are being forced to respond more often with Narcan because that's their first use. They're carrying that immediate response capability. And in a lot of cases, even with the Narcan still on site, it's too late. And as we were mentioning earlier with Jeremy Kitzhaber, Jeremy is a survivor. Well, he's got terminal cancer, and part of his pain management program requires significant. Hey, part of his pain management program requires so much opioids that he actually has to have his Narcan available, so that his first responder has it available if he overdoses on his pain management program, which is opioids. So getting back to this issue of one over the other, what do you think is the most important takeaway?
Well, yeah, that's a whole real mess, the opioid epidemic, isn't it? And so that brings us around to another point on legalization is, big pharma, and not everybody's going to agree on this, but we don't have to agree on everything in order to reach a goal, right? We don't always have to like everybody included in order to reach a goal. Big pharma, they can get lobbyists. They can pass whatever drug they want with whatever name they want and get this stuff done as long as they throw enough billions at the FDA. And so opioids, I remember when those were getting pushed that, oh, that's just great. I was working, as I still do, as a licensed esthetician. And so I see a lot of people that are having back pain and things like that. And doctors just thinking, oh, this is wonderful. We'll just write you a prescription for a pill. They don't want to know what's wrong with you. They don't want to give exercises. They didn't want to do any of the things that they should be doing in order to make sure that this was okay. They just wrote a pill, and everybody online thought, oh, this is wonderful. I get all my pain meds, haha, and it's one big joke, and now look where we are. What we know about CBD, even THC, is that it's actually non-habit forming. Studies came out back around Nixon era in the 1980s with the DARE program that said contrary things, but those studies certainly had a big agenda, didn't they? So that was able to be used to propel a lot of various taxes and to be able to create new government programs and justify some jobs and make a lot of money. With independent study, even ones where, and especially ones where they didn't have an agenda at all, they didn't know if it was going to work, if it wasn't going to work. We now know that it's non-habit forming. So over an opioid, which is very habit forming, we know that somebody can just simply stop taking their medical marijuana. They can just simply stop, and it's not going to cause problems with the body. It's not going to create a lot of issues, and that person would be okay. It's not really a gateway drug to anything like we used to believe that it was. In fact, we now have studies that if we just allow this, that it prevents people from using a lot of heavier, harder drugs. Whereas opioids that were allowed on the market do it exactly the opposite. Why not give it a chance? Why not give it a chance and see if this doesn't solve some problems? Because in other states, it literally has.
Nope. I see the young one there wants some attention.
Yeah, he's decided. He knows he's supposed to not be out here and being noisy, so I'm sorry for the background noise.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Yeah, and we're at a 30-minute mark, but there's one more thing that I really sort of want to cover. And that is right now the state of Idaho is currently purchasing $3 million in marijuana products a week. Yeah, that's $150 million in marijuana industry sales annually that leaves the state of Idaho.
Yeah,
yeah.
That could be going towards schools.
Right? It's going towards schools in Oregon and in Washington and now Montana. Idaho marijuana patients and users are actually paying for education out of state.
We're paying for everybody else's schools and education instead of being able to use the revenue generated for our own schools. Instead of being able to use it for our own infrastructure, instead of being able to generate a whole new source of income for the state in general. And let's even talk about a whole new farming crop that could potentially happen. We're sending that out of state. That seems a little ridiculous.
Well, and that's one of those things that we talk about. Reason why is because that 150 million a year, that's the end state. Okay, that's what's being sold at the dispensaries. That's not the exchange from the sale to the dispensaries from the growers. Not to pay the pay of the labor for trimming, for growing, for raising. So that 150 million is just the surface
of
what that industry could represent for the state of Idaho if we were allowed to grow it here, ship it here, sell it here, and not just first tier sale, but the wholesale sale to the dispensaries. This is an entire industry. And why is it taking us so long?
Well, I think that part of why it's taking so long isn't that the demand isn't here. And it isn't necessarily, again, that lawmakers won't comply with the popular demand. I think that it's a lot of these groups being very well-meaning, sometimes very well organized, haven't really gotten together in a way that helps them to move forward as a whole and a team. And really work together. And so that's part of what I'm here for. I'm have a background in being able to do team building and to make progress in this sort of area, and to roll up my sleeves and do the grunt work and to be able to help each other. Okay, well, we don't have to like each other to work on a goal. We don't have to care who's in charge to work on a goal. We can decide to just get the job done. And it's really not about who's in charge. Let's just get the job done. And so that's part of what I do. I'm certainly not the messiah of the whole project. I'm coming in close to the end, certainly not even in the beginning of getting this stuff done. But I think that my influence will mostly be in team building, so that these people can figure out how to work together and they can do the work and get it all done.
Thank you for spending your evening with us this evening, Ginger. Really appreciate it. For those of you who are interested, wickedwonderlandempire.com is your website. Entertainment, cosmetics. I mean, you got your hand in literally everything.
And yes, I do. I run events and stuff like that, and I'm pretty gothy. So people that check me out and research me, if they don't agree with my lifestyle choices, that's still okay. Again, you don't have to like me. We don't have to agree on one darn thing in order to get this done. Although you might like what I do. I'm a nice person.
He really is.
I'm a reasonably
woman,
well-adjusted adult. Thanks. So
okay.
yeah.
Again, thank you. You have a great evening, and give the little one my hugs.
All right. Thank you so much.